Hey, welcome back to the MMA Prospectus. It has been a couple of weeks. I want to say it's been almost a month.
It's been a little while.
It hopefully hasn't been that long, but between me having people in town and I don't
Family
know
too.
whatever else. I think you had you had a wedding going on. That's right. I remember. Not your wedding. I don't need to congratulate you on anything, but all that kind of stuff. We've had a busy few weeks and haven't been able to do a show. So I am excited to be joined once again by Tom Grant, my esteemed co-host. They're always esteemed. All my co-hosts are esteemed except for Connor. Fuck that guy. Um,
Good call.
for the next episode of the our latest episode of the MMA Prospectus. This week, we're going to take a quick look back at all these events that we have missed getting to recap, just the standout prospect performances from those events. And then we're going to dive in and talk about some of the fighters this week, most notably Kamaru Usman, Francis Ngannou, and Darrion Caldwell, who are the major blue chip highlight prospects fighting this week in the MMA world. On a week that's pretty dead for other fights. I went and checked too on the Tapology Fight Center for their upcoming fights, and usually it's like 2.5 pages of events, and it was 1.5 this week. So there's
Yeah.
really not a lot of MMA going on right now.
I feel like we're now coming out of like a post UFC 200 lull. Like we're obviously we're going to emerge from it. And now we're hitting like a run where there's like an event every weekend again for I don't even know how long. But I feel like just generally like the entire MMA world is kind of catching its breath after the international fight week or whatever.
Yeah, the UFC fight week thing. I kind of liked having family in town right after it because I skipped UFC 200 and then just got to take a week off of doing minimal coverage, which was nice. But yeah, it's been a little hard, I think, for fans and even like getting into like media and the broader culture. I think it's a little hard for people to get excited for events after a huge, massive run like that. Like people pour so much of their attention and focus on that afterward everyone's kind of like, I don't really care. I don't.
People's like, yeah, you just have like you have an emotional gas tank when it comes to
Yeah.
MMA, and people needed time to refill it. So I think having this past weekend off, like the fight card on Wednesday was fun. It was a fun card, which was nice. It didn't really feel like you were forcing yourself to watch MMA, and then
Uh-huh.
the weekend off, people got to do whatever. I'm feeling ready for a fight card that should be sneaky fun, I think, this weekend, even though I'm not going to it in Chicago.
Yeah, I think it won't be like unfortunately I think the main event will probably be really boring. I think it's gonna be Rory Mack versus Wonder Boy kind of
Mhm.
fight. Where like
Yep.
these people are obviously good and high level, but we're basically watching them not fight for 5 rounds. Unfortunately. I mean it's two counter strikers, and we've seen enough of Holly Holm to know that she's very willing to put on a completely boring 5-round decision if she thinks she can.
Well, I mean, like, if you listen to her camp, she's already beaten Ronda Rousey, so she's done holding back, right? That's the.
Well, if you hear her, though, you'll hear her, she says, like, I don't care about being exciting and entertaining and getting knockouts and all that. I'm there to win. Winning is the goal. Winning is like, winning is what the purpose of me as a sporting athlete is. And that's what I put before everything else. And
Oh,
that's how she fights.
100% being tongue-in-cheek about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, the whole thing sounded like she was like the whole idea that she like sandbagged her whole career is like some like people living out some weird anime fantasy where she's like, I'm only fighting at 50%.
I
Here's
know.
my 100%. Like,
That's right. This isn't even my final form.
exactly. Like I agree. I think the main event has a high chance of being tracked, but we can get to that. We can get to
But
that. Being just like a
the
not
rest of the
exciting card.
card, though, I don't think the rest of the card will be boring. I think the rest of the card might be sloppy. It might be a lot of totally unknown fighters,
Mm-hmm.
but it should be fun. It should be
Oh,
entertaining fights. All right. Anyway, let's jump way back, and I'm going to jump all the way back to the start of fight week, fight night, Dos Anjos versus Alvarez. And a couple of fighters I want to talk about really quick on this card, most notably Gilbert Burns, who just beat the absolute hell out of Łukasz Zajewski.
Yeah, going back to before, I think we both pegged this was like a showcase fight for Gilbert Burns, and it was exactly what we thought it was going to be.
Well, a lot of people thought that Zajewski would give Burns, like, he would be a tough enough grappler on the ground to make Burns stand with him, and that we would see Burns struggle. But his striking even just looked totally dominant in this fight. He looked the best ever. So that was a great step forward for Burns, continuing to show that he can absolutely dominate the lower end of the lightweight division, which is what you want to see out of a top prospect on their way up.
Yeah, no, it's he's a different level of athlete, different level of grappler, and then clearly also a different level of striker. Looked good. It was the showcase that we kind of all expected it to be. Who else fought on that card?
The other fighter to talk about would be Derrick Lewis from that card, and I'm just really happy he won. I know it was not the most amazing fight in the world, but he hits monstrously hard, which we still saw throughout all 3 rounds of that Roy Nelson fight. Like, even in the late round when they were both tired as hell and he could barely keep Roy Nelson off him, every moment that he got a chance to really hit Nelson hard, he hit him amazingly hard.
Yeah. Derrick Lewis looked like a guy, like that was a very, very tough fight for him. The thing I would say that really concerned me about this fight is that Roy Nelson, even within the realms of heavyweight, is not a good wrestler. And he was taking down Derrick Lewis with consistency.
Oh, I know. It asks a lot of questions about Lewis going forward, but the thing is, you look at the guys that have beat Nelson and the guys that have lost to him, and the guys in the UFC that have won a fight like beating Nelson, and it basically ensures that you will spend as much of the rest of your heavyweight career as you want in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dudes like Bigfoot Silva and Gabriel Gonzaga and Stefan Struve, you win a big top-level heavyweight fight at some point in your career. Doesn't really matter how good a heavyweight you are for the rest of your career. They're going to keep you around.
Yeah.
And that's all I want from Derrick Lewis, because he hits so goddamn hard that I really just, like, if he never becomes a masterful technician, the thought of watching him fight Josh Barnett or Andrei Arlovsky or, any other number of potential top 10 to 15 heavyweights for a long time makes me excited, because he's always going to put on a show, whether it's win or lose.
Yeah, no, I agree. He is a top shelf heavyweight action fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But heavyweight desperately looking for a next top 5 guy.
They are, and it's probably not going to be him. But that's the thing about heavyweight, is it could be him in 5 years.
Yeah, no, in 5 years it could be him. In 6, 7, 8 years it could be him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the developmentally speaking, the struggles he had wrestling with Roy Nelson was troubling. But then again, there's only 2 good wrestlers in the heavyweight division, and one of them just popped 5 times for steroids.
Yeah, so he can fight a lot of other big dudes at the top of the division. Like, he could fight Andrei Arlovsky, and we don't, Andrei Arlovsky's not exactly a takedown machine.
Yeah.
If that's just a pure striking fight, that would be an awesome fight.
Yeah.
So moving forward, then we got this Tough 23 finale card. Sorry, we were just brain skipped there. And the main performer off that Tough 23 card is very much Doo Ho Choi, who looked absolutely unbelievable, putting a hurting on Thiago Tavares in a similar Derrick Lewis-like fashion. Like, I gotta say, he got taken down and smothered for half a round, And no, I mean he did. Like he gave up the instant takedown to Tavares. The moment Tavares wanted to get him down, he did. But
I more felt like he did show some fact that he has a little bit of trouble like controlling range. But I mean, beginning of a fight, it's hard to stop a guy who wants to just come in on you to come in on you.
yeah.
I felt like Duho Choi basically spent the first half of the round establishing that he wasn't going to be held down, and then as soon as Thiago Tavares backed off and like started fighting at Duho Choi's range, then it was almost instantly over.
Well, if you go up back to the Lewis fight, if Nelson didn't have the chin he had or he has, which is amazingly, unbelievably unbreakable, even by heavyweight standards, how different would that fight have looked for Derrick Lewis?
I would say the big difference I saw is I actually saw Duho Choi counter wrestling and doing correct things to get up. Whereas
that's fair.
I didn't see Derrick Lewis doing that. I saw him like bench pressing Roy Nelson off of him, which if you can bench press Roy Nelson off of you, you can pretty much bench press like 99% of the global population off of you, which is fantastic. But my big thing about Duho Choi is I want to see him fight more. Like he has fought 3 times in 3 years in the UFC, and for a guy who like I would think they want to move up the ranks and make him a bigger deal. That's kind of unacceptable.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, he's borderline top 15 now off this win. So he's going to start getting some real attention soon. And it just sucks to see him fight once a year. And it's not often enough for a talent like him. It's still, I mean, it was a great performance. It's great to see those kind of electric physical talents be able to create highlight moments like that, even if they have struggles in between. Choi obviously has the kind of power that you just cannot teach anyone, and it took him all of like 2 seconds standing with Tavares to knock him out cold.
Yeah, just he's the kind of guy that like my jiu-jitsu instructor doesn't really watch that much MMA anymore. He's like a 68-year-old man who works a job and then does jiu-jitsu on the side. And he came in to class after the full slate of that fight week. And the first thing he said is like, so did you see that Duho Choi guy? So like Duho Choi definitely has that, like he grabs people's attention the way he puts people down.
Absolutely. The other fighter on that card that I was really super amazingly impressed by is Kevin Lee.
Yeah.
In a major jump forward fight for him. Like we talked about on, I think the last show we did, we talked about how Jake Matthews had made that jump in his last fight when he fought, what's his name? God damn it. Johnny Case. And we hadn't seen that jump happen for Lee, where he actually is imposing his physical skills at a high level and against a good opponent.
Yeah.
Really showing that he can bring the technique to make himself a dominating force. And he just dominated Matthews.
Yeah.
Like, took him down at will. And then, in something we haven't seen from Lee before, just brutalized him on the ground.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that was a fantastic performance from Lee, and I am really interested to see if he can continue that momentum, because if he's really upped his ground and pound game and the fluidity of his wrestling, like his takedown entries and his takedown adjustments were much better in this fight than I've seen from him before. And if he can keep that momentum going, then there's a lot, he has a lot to offer that lightweight division.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Really looked good. On the other end of the spectrum, Kaleo Roundtree.
I see. I knew this was coming for Kaleo Roundtree, though, so I don't feel that bad about it. Like, I picked him because I wanted to. I wanted him to win. And I feel bad about that because I have underrated Andrew Sanchez throughout his prospect career. And I'm impressed. Like, I think Sanchez, he really has a complex wrestling and control game to show off, and I really like it. I'm happy to see it. But Roundtree is just super raw. He's had like 4 pro fights. He's a great athletic talent, but he just has not had much cage time. So I gotta say, like, I am less worried about Roundtree than I maybe am about Will Brooks, even off a win.
I would say that's fair. I mean, for Kaleo Roundtree, we put him in our top 3 at middleweight, but I think we made it pretty clear. Number one, he's got a long way to go before he realizes the potential that he has, like just based on his athleticism and his power, just because of how little experience he has fighting. And then I feel of the 3, he had the biggest bust factor also because of it's relying on him. And we talk about skills can be learned. Skills can absolutely be learned, but you see there are MMA is full of athletic guys who never really learn the deeper skills and get that deeper like comfort with things. And you can still be a good fighter, but you're never like there are plenty of guys that don't get as good as they could have, or they figure it out. The classic is they figure it out after they've already passed their athletic prime.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So Kaleo, the biggest thing, he just his utter inability to get up was the most worrisome. That like he just was not able to work his way up the fence and get up with any consistency. It'll change. He'll get better, but still not a good performance for a guy making his like official UFC debut.
Yeah, it's I'm not shocked by it. I'm a little worried about it, but middleweight too does not have a ton of awesome wrestlers in it right now. Like at the bottom end, there are just not that many great takedown artists.
There are a lot of grinders.
There are a lot of grinders, it's true, but there are also a lot of really sloppy strikers. Like I could, there are a lot of dudes like Oluwale Bambos who are, or Jake Collier, who are like dynamic, or they have like all these parts to their game, but they're not really like effectively. And I realize putting Bambos and Collier, like the high athletic end and the low athletic end in the same block is a little funky there. But there are just a lot of guys who are willing to scrap wherever the fight goes. And I think Roundtree is going to be able to have a little success if he can just kind of get the right matchups for a little while until he rounds out. And if he doesn't round out, then he doesn't. Sometimes getting to the UFC as early in your career as he has is just not a good move. Doesn't pay out for guys. They end up constantly struggling, trying to catch up and change their game constantly to meet a standard that they are just fundamentally unready to meet.
Yeah.
But yeah, Will Brooks, I don't know. I want to be really hyped about Will Brooks. He beat Ross Pearson in a fight. At the time, I didn't think he won because I thought he got dropped in round 1 briefly in what was a close round. That would have swayed it for me, but apparently it was a slip, not a drop. The ref scored it right. I'm fine with him winning at this point. But it really seems like his striking game is not where it needs to be for him to be an elite lightweight at the top of the division.
Yeah, I kind of got that impression too. He looks like he's going to slot in nicely into the lightweight division, but it's just such a shark tank that like you got to be something really, really special to stand out, and like to be up cut above the lightweights, you got to be something really special. And I don't think we have a lightweight that is a cut above all the other lightweights right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like Rafael dos Anjos just showed how quickly, even when you get on a hot run, how quickly it can turn around for you. The only one that maybe could get there is right now is Khabib, but I mean, like it's been so long since we've seen Khabib in there with a top flight lightweight. I don't even know anymore like where he's at.
Yeah, it's fair to wonder whether he can just stay healthy enough over the length of his career to make the kind of impact that people wanted him to.
Yeah,
but I've heard people comparing Brooks as like a potentially Khabib Nurmagomedov type fighter of like, he's got this incredible athleticism to him that just allows him to overwhelm opponents. And what we saw in this Pearson fight was he wasn't getting all the takedowns on Ross Pearson in a way that, like, when we've seen prime Khabib in there with anyone, he will get every takedown he wants.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the ability you have to have if, like Brooks and like Khabib, you're not really you don't box really very effectively. Like Khabib can throw these great one-off power strikes, and he's got the amazing athleticism to land them, and so can Brooks. But Khabib also has this amazingly deep wrestling bag to dip into on top of that, and Brooks is not bad there, but Pearson stuffed him a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm a little concerned. It could be just a first time stepping in adjustment fight, but it raises concerns. Otherwise, I want to just briefly give a shout out on that card to Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva. Dude is looking like a beast, and I am really excited to see if he can continue that role. He knocked out Andrew Holbrook super quickly in that fight, in a fight that most people were picking Holbrook to win. And he looks like he has the physical tools, and he's got the exciting dynamic striking style. So I'm interested to see how far he can carry that.
Yep.
Now moving over to UFC 200, and the only prospect on this card really, I didn't see much of this card, so I don't know how Kelvin Gastelum did, or say
that fight. The reaction to that fight was much more, look at how terrible Johnny Hendricks looks, more than look how amazing Kevin Gastelum looks. It seemed like Gastelum did make some strides forward. Hendricks just looks slow. He looks stiff. He made some adjustments and did some work against Gastelum, but Gastelum solidly won 2 rounds. The story of that fight was much more with people. Johnny Hendricks looks like he is in full decline at this point.
He also had an absolutely trash weight cut, apparently.
Yeah.
Like, he was shaking on the scales, like visibly just spasming.
He's 32. He's been fighting professionally for 9 years, and he has never gone about weight cutting and losing weight in a way that would, seem to be one that would lead to longevity. So a lot of problems are coming home to roost for Johnny Hendricks, it would seem. Kevin Gastelum took advantage of it. I watched this fight. It left very little impression on me.
All right. And the Northcutt fight?
Sage Northcutt won. Sage Northcutt continues to – his striking game looks a little bit broadened. He looked a little bit more comfortable on the feet. His grappling game still looks like trash. Doesn't seem like a whole lot changed from the loss to Barberena. Like, if you threw Barberena back in there with him, he'd probably tap Sage Northcutt about as easily as he did in their first meeting. Yeah. And I'm just not sure right now how much Sage Northcutt is, like, just based on how he's fighting, if he's addressing these holes or if he is, just kind of happy where he's at and just trying to make some money, because he was in 2 or 3 deep, like, big trouble submissions, and at times Marin just looked like too tired to actually finish them.
Yeah, I mean, they're just gonna, like, it's that combination. Not only did they bring in somebody super inexperienced to try and learn how to fight in the UFC, essentially, because that's what every inexperienced fighter basically has to do when they get to the UFC, if they're as early in their career as he is. But you have that combo of being not only inexperienced, but of being a teenager, of being like 20. And that, I think that the learning curve is just that much steeper than if you're talking about an experienced 26 or 27 or 28-year-old who has already maybe had an athletic career in another sport, or who has who's been around and lived long enough to kind of easily take in and understand the lessons that they should be learning from things. Sometimes kids can be a little dense. I mean, like,
he really needs to get out of, like, the Gracie Baja he's training at, and, like, full time at a serious camp, because he looked, again, his grappling looked like he was familiar with every position they were in, but had to think through everything instead of just reacting. And he looked like shocked at the pace they were going at on the mat at times. Which MMA is a much higher paced sport when it comes to mat work than your traditional jiu-jitsu match. And he didn't look ready for it. And just, again, I said it on Twitter the night of, when you're talking about Sage Northcutt in potential wise, we're not talking about the fight with Marin or whatever his next fight is, or even a fight sometime next year. We're talking about a fight in 2019 or 2020.
Yeah.
Like when we're talking about Sage Northcutt.
Very likely. It's just a question of how well do they protect him until that time. Because he's got the athletic tools, he's got the interest, and he can get to any camp he wants, it seems. So is he going to, how many speed bumps is he going to hit along the way, and how many speed bumps will the UFC let him hit along the way?
Yep.
So let's jump over to UFC Fight Night, McDonald versus Lineker then really quick. Last thing I want to talk about is Lando Venata.
Yeah, stepped in short notice and looked fantastic.
I was really excited about him coming in. I did not think that there was any chance he would beat Ferguson, but by all accounts, he apparently almost did.
Yeah, he had Ferguson on skates in the first round, hurt him if I remember correctly, more than once. Big jump from his regional fight looks for Lando. Looked fantastic, but was fighting the entire first round at Tony Ferguson's pace, and his cardio just gave out big time. And Ferguson went to work.
Ferguson fights at such an impossible pace.
Yeah, Ferguson went to work, and eventually he locked up a Darce choke while still standing.
Nice.
Because having long arms is apparently awesome.
Yeah, I was talking to Connor about this on the Vivisection the other day, and we were both kind of wondering, like, I wonder how long Tony Ferguson can keep fighting the way he does.
Yeah.
Because he is, like, his style is so athletically taxing and so difficult to maintain. And, like, you see so few fighters who can even try and start to fight the way he does over the amount of time he does. And it's just like, is there going to be that wall he hits where he's suddenly like, you know, he loses half a step athletically and the whole style just crumbles, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's worth wondering because he, like, so few fighters fight at the kind of pace and with the kind of just wild creativity that he does.
Mm-hmm.
Even like John Jones, who started out with that kind of, you know, that kind of pace and creativity, has slowed and changed his game up immensely since.
Yeah, had to completely. He like basically changed his whole game up.
Yeah, you know? He stopped being the power slamming wrestler and dynamic offensive force to somebody who's much more comfortable just wall and mauling guys.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's not a lot that I'm, to be super excited about from that card. You know, there are a lot of fighters who are kind of on the cusp of non-prospectness. Lewis Smolka, Holtzman's just kind of, he got Cody Pfister. It's hard to know what to take away from beating Cody Pfister. And Matthew Lopez getting thrown into the deep end, some stuff like that. But let's move ahead now to this UFC on Fox card we've got coming up here. And I'm not sure who I'm more excited to talk about first. So I'm going to let you lead it. Francis Ngannou or Kamaru Usman?
I mean, right now coming into this card, I think it's Francis Ngannou. Like, he's kind of the great hope for the heavyweight division, that there might actually be a fighter on the rise in that division. Obviously coming off the win of Curtis Blades, a fight that we both kind of expected him to struggle in a little bit, and he came out looking amazing in terms of like his defensive wrestling and his overall sense of how to fight. MMA looked to have taken a big jump, and now the UFC is putting him in with a fighter who is significantly shorter than him, significantly older than him, and his basically entire game is predicated around wrestling and getting guys to the ground and keeping them there and beating them up. It seems like the UFC wants Ngannou on Fox to beat the ever-loving shit out of somebody.
Yeah, this Mihailovic fight is the one he was originally scheduled for back at was it Rotterdam? Or no, it's the Croatia card, I believe.
Yeah.
That Ngannou, and they brought in Blades instead, which I was incredibly impressed with how Ngannou won that fight, and the way he won that fight really makes this Mihailovic fight just seem like it should be primed for an absolute shit kicking.
Yeah, I mean that it would be notable if Ngannou stumbles in this fight and ends up getting like dropping 2 rounds or something like that. It would speak to maybe Curtis Blades not being the fighter we thought he was, or that being like a one-time thing. But I fully expect Ngannou to kind of win this one with authority, and then.
Yeah, Mihailovic is a 5'11", 225-pound heavyweight who is he's really mediocre at anything that he's good at. Like his best skills, which are very much like, let me lean on you and be tougher than you and take your shots and then come back with stuff as you get tired. Like that just feels like he's going to get absolutely devastated by Ngannou. So if he loses this fight, it will just. I hate heavyweight MMA because it probably means he will lose this fight.
He'll lose this fight, and then we'll be left adrift yet again.
Yeah, but it should not happen. The thing that's interesting to me too about this, talking about Ngannou and Usman together, is that they're both African-born UFC fighters, which, I mean, Ngannou from Cameroon, Usman from Nigeria. And, you know, it speaks to sort of the weirdness of how, like, they've got this Tough 24 thing coming up, which includes a South African MMA champ whose name I can't remember.
Bruna Vargas.
No. Something Zulu or something like that.
Sorry, just my mind went immediately to, the GOAT of South African MMA.
I know. And we've got Gareth McClellan out of there too, out of the same EFCA in South Africa. But that doesn't really seem like a reasonable funnel for actual UFC level talent.
Mm-hmm.
MMA promotions in Africa.
Mm-mm.
So it's interesting to see how, like, MMA might be able to tap into athletes from an entire continent. I mean, it's not like I don't want to talk about Africa like it's a country and be oh, how do we get more African fighters? But like, how do we draw any talent off of this massive population mass? And it seems to be people who immigrate to other countries and then grow up there and train there and find gyms there. And that's, we've got Usman and Ngannou both on this card, both as blue chip, absolute blue chip prospects. And it's very, I don't know, it's interesting to see.
Yeah, like sports on like the entire continent of Africa is a much deeper discussion. That is, it's an interesting one, but not what we're here to do.
No, I know.
I think it's pretty much just going to have to be when a fighter emerges, an international promotion has to pick them up, and I don't think it's going to go any deeper than that right now for a whole variety of reasons. It's all going to
be chance. It's all going to have to be chance.
Yeah.
And where it's not chance is going to be countries like France and Germany and other European nations that have really brought, had very open immigration policies, taking on a lot of, especially from their former colonies, taking on a lot of immigrants from the country. Yeah. And those immigrant populations being talent bases that would then turn to fight sports, because a lot of times that's where people who are poor tend to go when they want to compete athletically.
I think you nailed it in the sense that, like, when they come over to MMA, it's going to be people who immigrated to either like MMA hotspots like France, Central Europe, or the United States, who then get into the sport, maybe have a combat sports background already, because judo is fairly prevalent in different nations in Africa, and
And boxing too. There's there's a fair bit of
boxing too. So and then transition over into MMA after they've already moved to a different nation somewhere else in the world that is more set up for MMA.
Yeah. So on the to then transition that into talking about Kamaru Usman, I feel a little weird about this because I'm very hyped on Kamaru Usman as a legit top shelf blue chip prospect, and I just feel like even among the other an analytical hardcore MMA community, the response is decidedly meh. Who the fuck is that dude?
I know a few people who are high on him outside of you and me, but most of them are associated enough with us that
are they not Connor and Pat? Connor and Pat don't count.
Yeah, no. I get so far why the response to him has been kind of in some ways, because I think a lot of people are having a hard time getting the Ultimate Fighter out of their heads, which again is just what takes place on the show to me is not actually MMA in this sense.
It really isn't.
But he's a very, very good wrestler, and it's more than just he's strong, which he really is. He's also a very talented technical wrestler. He's picking up the striking game on social media pretty much every day. He's putting up something about putting up his mitt work or putting up his sparring rounds or something. This guy is investing a lot of time in becoming a better striker. And I think the fight he's going into against Yakovlev is a well-matched fight for him, because it's a fighter who's going to challenge him in all the areas in which he is lacking a little bit.
Well, I think it's also a fighter that can challenge him where he's best. Yakovlev is a great technical wrestler.
Yeah, and I expect this one. I would hope that this is where we see Usman kind of handle somebody in the wrestling department, where it kind of surprises people how well he does, because he is a legitimately amazing wrestler. And I don't know why people I kind of get it, because he's had some fights that have not been super exciting, and he doesn't look dynamic even when he's doing dynamic things.
Yeah, he's kind of got that Andre Harrison problem, except with a deeper technical game and more power. Where Andre Harrison, we've talked about him. He's risen up through the Titan FC ranks. He's been a consistently top shelf winning fighter there for them, and yet it's just all of these split decisions, close decisions, and he's got this very I am very powerful and a very good wrestler, but I really implement that power wrestling with a grind to takedown game where I'm going to grind you and then take you down. And Usman has some of that same style. He's been a much better finisher than Harrison to date. His only decision is over Leon Edwards. But people see that grinding wrestling to takedown style, and they're just oh God, I don't want to watch any of this at all. And it's very hard then to catch them on to be no, I mean, this guy, in that Edwards fight, we saw him eat a bunch of hard shots and come back with harder ones. He's got some serious power in his hands. His technique is coming along. And even the thing that really impressed me in that Edwards fight is that he's showing enough consistency and real confidence in his striking that he can make his power make up for his technical gaps.
Yeah.
He's willing to just march through and eat a shot to land a much harder one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's he doesn't have the hand speed or the natural power that Dan Henderson does, but it's the kind of thing that late in his career he has continued to make Dan Henderson such a force, is that willingness. I will just march through whatever you threw at me and then I'm going to hit you so much harder than that you're going to be forced not to strike with me.
Yeah, no, he definitely has a check in the toughness box, in terms of like being able to take a shot that implies that he's going to be pretty good at this MMA thing going down the road. And he is just like freaking brutal on top. He just beats the shit out of people when he takes them down. And I feel like it's going to be a battle that we're going to be having for a while with people about like get excited about Carl Usman, and the resounding answer will just be no.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with like how he sets guys up for the finish, and then just generally, while being a great athlete, he just looks kind of stiff at times, and people see, and then when he does amazing things, they don't look as amazing unless you. I don't want to say know what you're looking at, but unless you really, I guess the only way I would describe it is that like one of the things he does that when we were watching tape on him originally was he was hitting lifts in wrestling matches from areas you shouldn't hit lifts. Yeah. And when we sent it over to Coach Mike to be like, hey, is this guy a good wrestler? He would say, A, yes, really good wrestler, and B, holy shit, he's strong.
Yeah.
But it
and we've seen him too. Like one of the things that really I remember distinctly from his, watching his wrestling tape was that like guys could get amazingly deep in on a takedown against him, and he could shut them off. Like he's going to be impossibly hard to take down in MMA.
Yeah, it's if he continues to develop as a striker, I don't think there are going to be many people in the welterweight division that can force him to go to the mat when he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And if he has, oh God, why am I blanking on the Blackzilian striker? If Henry Hooft is worth even half of his reputation, Carl Usman should be a pretty damn good striker.
Well, we've seen the technical jump made by Gilbert Burns that we're talking about. Like,
oh yeah, I'm saying that fully on the whole. Henry Hooft is a great striking coach train. If we've already seen improvement from Usman. He's already starting to look like a Hooft train striker. The way he throws punch kick combinations, the way he makes use of his reach, and he's starting to understand the interplay between his striking and his entries and takedowns. I think Usman continues to grow, and
the only interesting thing with the Hooft thing is whether or not he can sort of like overcome Hooft being a really bad cornerman.
Yeah,
because apparently like that's the downside of Hooft in the Blackzilians is that he just seems to be really like detrimental and morally detrimental in the corner.
Don't you give up on me, Zane.
I know. Just fighter come back to the corner. You're losing. What are you doing out there? You don't give up. It's just like,
come on. That's what that is a coaching style that is usually reserved for like the Ukrainian and Russian coaches of the world. But when you come back to the corner, you're like, what are you doing? You're terrible. Why do I even coach you?
Yeah, and Hooft has some of that, which I think the nice thing for Usman is coming up through wrestling, going into like Olympic team trials, and some of the other stuff that he did, like a long NCAA D2 career, D2 champion, is that he probably has a very significant amount of mental fortitude, and like really just I know what I'm doing. I know how to be confident in what I'm doing out there.
Yeah.
Because, we've seen with guys like Abel Trujillo who may lack confidence at times that it just seems like a teardown. Like,
I'm thinking specifically of the Rumble Johnson fight where he came back and Hoof said, like, don't you quit on me, which you saw in Rumble's face. Like, am I quitting? Am I quitting? Oh God, I think I'm quitting. Like, It like guys in his head that he was quitting.
With guys maybe like Rumble or like Michael Johnson or like Abel Trujillo or some of the other Blackzilians fighters that have been a little more up and down over their careers, I think some of that Hooft corner advice can be really get in their heads.
Yeah.
But I think for maybe guys like Usman and like Gilbert Burns and some of the other Blackzilians fighters who had other like a lot of sporting success in other areas. Hopefully, it'll maybe just be a little less detrimental because they're so used to being very successful in other areas of the sport. They can just be like, nah, I know I'm really good, so I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it is a style that some people respond to that style of coaching.
Yeah.
Some people get angry and like, well, I'll fucking show him and get out there and then perform better.
And some people just go, oh, wait, is that what's going on? Oh God, I need to try and fix everything now.
Yeah. So it is. Yeah. It's coaching styles are a whole nother can of worms. And I agree with you generally about Hoof that as a cornerman thus far in the UFC, he seems like at times he can do more damage than good.
It's something to watch for. Otherwise on this card, there's not a lot of other prospects, frankly, I'm really looking at. Kylan Curran has, she's kind of that case to me, too, of just a potentially very good athlete with some skills who is just trying to learn how to fight in the UFC very, too much too soon.
Muntasiri, kind of, if you want to like ignore the fact that he had one fight in 2008. He started fighting consistently in 2011.
Yeah, and he's still Muntasiri is one of those no process guys that I have. Even though he's got the physical tools and he's got all the flash, I have a lot of trouble getting excited about him because the process is so limited.
His peak to me, like his like ideal everything goes right is like a Kung Lee style, like really exciting, flashy striker from like a background that we don't see a lot in MMA, and then looks like it when he's out there. Especially when Kung like went into MMA and like totally Kung wrestled, he did Sanshao, so like he had a wrestling base and a takedown base, and it became primarily defensive in MMA. Whereas like if you watch the Sanshao matches, he was just throwing dudes who had no idea how to wrestle around.
Yep.
So Muntasiri's got some work to do on that front, because if I'm remembering correctly, he's starting to learn how to use the cage.
Yeah.
And when he wins,
he's got some basic. Awesome. He's got some cool parts to his game, no doubt, and he's got I think there's the potential to have the collection of assets there, but it's just his striking game consists entirely of let me look for this incredible power shot to set up, and in the meantime I'm going to get hit a bunch, and I'm so focused on finding these power shots that I can get taken down really easily too.
Well, he is doing and we really don't see this much. He is attempting to convert a Olympic Taekwondo style striking game to MMA.
Yep.
Which we really haven't seen that. I mean, we've had a couple.
That may be because it just doesn't work.
I mean, the restrictions put on Taekwondo fighters are pretty extreme, and the things that are encouraged in Olympic Taekwondo, specifically the spinning attacks, aren't necessarily the most practical at all the time. Like situationally, they can be very useful, but like as a primary piece of offense, it can be very difficult to use. And I think we're seeing him trying to adapt his instincts and what he is good at to MMA while learning a new set of skills. So it is interesting to see, and he's a fun fighter for me. Like I look forward to watching him fight, mostly because he's either going to get run over or he's going to like land some crazy spinning kick that puts a guy down.
Yeah. And I'll admit too,
Alex Oliveira, he's probably not going to put down with a crazy spinning kick.
Yeah, Alex Oliveira is a prospect I'm still very excited about. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Kaleo Roundtree because they're obviously like Roundtree is just a powerhouse. Oliveira is much more of this like weird, wiry, crazy, sort of like crazy aggression, strength guy that you have to just fight off you all the time. But Oliveira, it's that same sort of like enter MMA late with no combat skills and try and learn the game very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got all of these parts, none of which are exceptional. He's a okay wrestler, a decent grappler, and a all right striker who carries power. but he's not going to beat a great pure striker or a great pure wrestler or a great pure grappler in any one of those areas. I'm still very interested to see if he can make jumps in any one of those areas from fight to fight, or if he can just jump in putting them all together more fluidly fight to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this Muntasri fight is going to be a chance for him to show off because Muntasri is very easily overwhelmed by aggression. So I feel like that kind of sets up perfectly for Oliveira.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'm hoping and praying for an exciting fight out of Dmitry Smolyakov.
Yeah. That fight I think is going to be a quintessential like heavyweight fight in not a good way.
But see, so Smolyakov is a wrestling coach for like one of the major Polish gyms. I don't know if it's Joanna's or if it's Pudzian's, but it's he's a pretty serious Greco and freestyle wrestler out of Russia, or was, and he's shown a real devotation to becoming a decent boxer on top of that. So he's got this very like stiff lower body, slick upper body, and fast hands kind of style. Like lots of head movement, upper body movement, quick, sharp punches with power at heavyweight. And with that, like usually I'm really like suspect of that because it's like, well, you're standing kind of straight up and down and relying on head movement and how, you're going to lean into stuff. You're going to get set up for takedowns really easily. How well is that going to translate? But with that Greco base and at heavyweight, where very few fighters are capable of lifting a leg up to the head of their opponent, I have a lot more faith that he could make something out of that. Because we've seen out of guys like Dan Kelly, who has that Greco base, where it's like, even if it looks like he's barely sprawling at all, he can just kind of lean over on somebody and suddenly the takedown is stuffed. So if Smolyakov can just stay on his feet and be the sharper boxer than other heavyweights, I'm really interested to see where that goes. It may not happen. I may just be blowing smoke here, but I'm excited about it. A little.
I have a bad feeling this fight ends up being like taking place entirely against the fence.
It could
in not good ways.
KLB is very much a wall and stall fighter. So if Smolyakov cannot keep KLB off of him, then we are looking at 3 rounds of limited wall and stall action.
You want to jump over to Bellator and talk about some slightly more exciting
let's jump over to Bellator real quick and one very much more exciting prospect and then a card that's otherwise got a few interesting names dotted across it. The big one being Darian Caldwell at bantamweight, the former NCAA Division I national champion who has frankly taken to MMA with much more of a quickness and fluidity than I thought he would.
Yeah, no, he appears to be on the outside UFC equivalent of the Phenom track. As he is just blowing through every challenge put in front of him. In a way that other top flight wrestlers that Bellator has pounced on really early in their MMA careers just haven't.
Yeah, I feel like Caldwell is kind of the payoff of this system they're trying, which is to sign every top flight wrestler that wants to try MMA to a contract as quickly as possible, just in the hopes that 1 or 2 of them shake out to being a big star. And Caldwell is like, that's where that pays off. I don't know that he will ever quite have the personality to be a big star in terms of like an actual big draw, but he fights just wonderfully. Like his game is all fluidity and interconnectedness, and he's kind of like, as we've seen with Will Brooks, he's not a clean striker yet, but he really seems to understand how MMA works and how fighting works. So he has a lot of that, like, if I have the opportunity, I can find a way to hit you really hard,
Mm-hmm.
even if my technique isn't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just, beautifully seems integrated his wrestling and his striking together with a grappling game.
I was gonna say his grappling game has looked much improved the last two fights, like slapping on slick chokes.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that was missing from his game previously. Even when he was submitting guys, it wasn't
Yeah.
like now Joe Warren given not amazing mat grappler, but still a tough fight, like hard
Yeah.
to
And
submit.
Warren's not terrible.
No, he's not. He's a really good he's a really good test. He'd be a good gatekeeper within the UFC.
Yeah.
Like he's not just like some dude who's making bones on the regional circuit because he can't hack it somewhere else.
No.
He's a good fighter, and Darian Caldwell just ran through him.
Yeah. I kind of feel like this Time fight is actually a step back. So
Well, I mean, you're running into now the Bellator problem of like, all right, we have a legitimately good bantamweight. Who are we going to like? Where does his career go from here?
well, to me, this is just the last fight before a title shot.
Yeah.
And we're just warming him up to get ready for Eduardo Dantas. And frankly, I think Caldwell can beat Dantas. Like,
Oh yeah.
I like Dantas as a fighter. I think he's fun, but he's physically underwhelming, even for a big bantamweight. And he's, he gets by on his speed and athleticism a lot, where Caldwell can just absolutely match him speed for speed, athleticism for athleticism, and size for size. Caldwell's a really big bantamweight too. So I feel like Caldwell's going to be, even as inexperienced as Caldwell is, I feel like he's going to be ready for Dantas, and this is just our warm up to get him there.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to see that. Weirdly, because like yesterday was showed that Philippe Lins versus Guilherme Viana was on the main card, and Bruna Vargas versus Emily Ducote was on the undercard, but they appeared to have switched that up.
Well, Bruna Vargas looks like a pretty interesting prospect for what division is that? Is she
Women's strawweight? They're
women's
actually
yes.
bringing some strawweight, surprisingly.
Checking out her fight. She's a pretty solid athlete. She's like I say she's better than a solid athlete. She's a good athlete. She's a plus athlete and very aggressive striker and top grappler. Like gets after her opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Only 2 fights so far, so both of them were like very regional fights. So it'll be interesting to see what she looks like on a bigger stage, but still, they might have something. She might be an interesting female fighter for Bellator, which is something Bellator's not had in a long time.
I really dislike the way that Bellator has almost for their entire promotional run approached women's MMA, where it was like they were this early adopter, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, Bellator's got women's fights before the UFC. They're doing a great job bringing it in. It's really awesome." And then it was just like ever since they brought it in and got that initial credit, it's been a permanent sideshow.
Yeah,
Been like, we'll stick them on the prelims. We're never gonna. They're gonna fight once every year and a half. There's just been no development, no consistency to it, no interest in actually raising the profile of the fights. And I'm hoping that turns around. We're seeing more women now fighting. They've got, I think they've got 2 women's strawweight fights on this card, which is great. It seems like they're getting a couple on every card now. But we're not like, it's always different fighters. We're not seeing any of the same talent like coming back fight after fight. It doesn't feel like I'm not seeing any them actually getting a lot of development out of these fighters. I think they did after from McFarlane recently. That it's happening a little. I'm just not. I don't trust it yet. And Coker has, he even with the Strikeforce thing, like he has the reputation of being an early women's MMA adapter and doing a lot for it. But then also being the guy who would stick Ronda Rousey in a co-main event slot with like, I can't even remember, just like some random journeyman light heavyweight over her. Like
Yeah.
he's never been quite willing to sell out on women as MMA stars, except for Gina Carano.
Yeah.
And we're getting a lot of these Bellator fighters seem like they're like we're hiring the prettiest women we can and not necessarily the best.
Oh God, it was Antoine Britt and Sayers.
Yeah, Lumbumba Sayers.
Yeah, God. Oh man.
Where it's just like you're seriously putting Ronda Rousey as a co-main to Antoine Britt versus Lumbumba Sayers.
That was her second Strikeforce fight, so.
But even still, like,
yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Like, just put her on the headline if
you're putting her in the co-main, then you're already thinking that she can be great, and you're just like, I don't quite know that I'm willing to let her. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. Bruna Vargas kind of feels like she highlights. There are a lot of fighters on this Bellator card where I'm like, this person looks like an interesting athlete who needs a lot of development. I'm interested to see what happens with them. So we have like Bruna Vargas, that Trey Ogden versus Manny Mara's fight, but more, who was I looking at?
Chris Harris.
Chris Harris looks like a good athlete. Chucka Willis, who I've seen fight too.
Yeah, Chucka Willis. I missed him the first time I looked at this card, but he...
And Gaston Reno as well. Like, these guys are all really powerful athletes whose games just are otherwise really very unexciting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like, okay, you can throw a couple flashy strikes in a row or maybe hit a slick takedown, or you have some power. And I just haven't seen any of the rest of an evolving high-level MMA game yet. But there are a lot of guys on this Bellator undercard that I'm kind of looking at like that. One of the few fighters I think one of the few prospect fights on this card that I'm really like, one of these guys could be a high-level guy in short order is that Guillermo Villana versus Philippe Lin's fight.
Yeah. That, to me, is the premier prospect fight of this card.
Lin was a scouting report back in the day highlight fighter whose career has just hit some speed bumps. It feels like he's just never gotten the consistency of fight time that you'd expect. Like, he started in 2005, and then his career hit a speed bump from 2006 to 2011. He didn't fight, and then since 2011, he's just kind of been on a slow 1 or 2 fights a year kind of thing.
Yeah, but no, I'm looking forward to that one. That one I'm gonna find interesting, and then if you want to go off Bellator.
Not really.
I was going to say the one...
Oh, Mackenzie Dern, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say the one thing this Friday night, Mackenzie Dern's making her MMA debut, and she is probably, she is the best female Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor probably ever. Like, best active for sure. She's only 23, and she did basically did the Jiu-Jitsu Grand Slam last year. 2015 was the year Mackenzie Dern. She won World Championships. She won the Pans. She won the European Open. She won ADCCs on top of winning a couple other things. She beat Gabby Garcia in an absolute division. So if people have seen Gabby Garcia, Mackenzie Dern is several weight classes below her.
Yeah.
The problem is
several weight classes below Gabby Garcia, frankly.
Yeah, no, I am too. I'm 2 or 3 below Gabby. Yeah. The problem is that women's jiu-jitsu is a very, very, very shallow pool. That said, Mackenzie Dern, good athlete, very good grappler, extremely well-rounded grappler. The daughter of a very accomplished jiu-jitsu competitor and judo black belt. So, like, it's basically just grown up doing this. So I have no idea how she's going to do in MMA. She might be like someone to take the sport by storm. She may be kind of a Michelle Nicolini reboot where, like, it just isn't really her passion and it doesn't really click at any point. But for the most part, she sounds like she is doing the classic, like, I've accomplished everything I can in sport jiu-jitsu. I am now shifting gears, retiring from sport jiu-jitsu and doing MMA. it'll just be interesting to see how much she sticks to that with like how hot professional grappling is right now. Though, as hot as professional grappling is right now, the women really haven't been able to cash in on it.
Yeah. What's her weight class like? Like, where does she fall? You know?
She is on the smaller end of women's bantamweight.
So okay, so I mean, so she might even, and like that would be a reason if the UFC opened a flyweight division, she would be the kind of person they could target there.
Yes, yeah, that would probably be. Let me see what.
So in fact, you're saying several weight classes below Gabby Garcia. That's a full person below Gabby Garcia.
Yeah, no, and it was like if you go back and watch the match, it's an Abu Dhabi match, it's a gi match, and frankly, for anyone but a jiu-jitsu nerd, it's not very exciting. But she essentially racks up a few advantages doing actual things, and then Gabby is never able to pass her guard. It was a really impressive showing, and Gabby's not exactly well liked in the jiu-jitsu community, so people celebrated it as someone finally beating Gabby Garcia. But she's really talented, very athletically talented. If she sticks with this, she might be an interesting fighter just because she has such a skill level, but who knows?
Well, I mean, the thing with, I mean, even at women's bantamweight, even as a small bantamweight, that's very interesting. It could be a very interesting thing because that game there is still so, like, a lot of it is so rudimentary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if she's like a mediocre striker, if she can hit takedowns, you know, she may just be entire worlds better than her competition as a grappler, to the point that they're not, you're not getting just the, oh, I got top control and I can just shut down your MMA grappling game because that's where the meta game is. Women's MMA, we at women's bantamweight, we have not necessarily yet seen that meta game play out.
Yeah, no, I mean, we only just saw Holly Holm work something resembling like a men's MMA metagame against Ronda Rousey, and then it disappeared against Miesha Tate.
Yeah.
So I think Mackenzie Dern could make like the skill, her ground skill could let her be a good women's bantamweight, even if she just plays like a very Brazilian jiu-jitsu like game. She would be a notable women's bantamweight. If she takes the MMA, she could go further than that, but I don't really want to go on a limb here because my big thing is, and we talked about this, especially talking about guys coming from other sports, we don't know until we've seen them fight MMA. Like, I mean,
you don't know what pieces are missing and will always be missing. Some people just cannot for the life of them ever learn how to throw or take a punch.
Yeah.
And that's just all there is to it. On that note, it's time to close the show. You can follow me on Twitter at TheseAintTime. You can follow Tom on Twitter at TP_Grant. You can find both of us over at Bloody Elbow. Me more so than Tom. You can give this video a like. That's a thumbs up over on YouTube. That helps us a bunch. And subscribe to MMANation.com. It's DOTCOM over on YouTube. That's where you get all the latest Bloody Elbow shows, interviews, analysis, all our good stuff. We can coming at you next week, getting ready for UFC 201, Lawler versus Woodley. Prospectus will be back. Vivisection will be back. Care Don't Care will be back. We'll have Knuckle Up, Heavy Hands, all that good stuff. So stay tuned, and thanks everyone for tuning in.